You didn't just win, you won alone. And that changes everything in ways nobody talks about. There is a strange silence that follows solo victories. No applause that feels real, no hands that truly clapped for you when you were struggling, and no comfort from those who once doubted you. You stand in the same world, but somehow it feels completely different now. Because success has a sound and loneliness makes it louder. When you were struggling, people had opinions, judgments, even laughter. But now that you've risen, the same people are strangely quiet. Not because they are happy, but because they are processing what they never believed would happen. This is where it starts to feel heavy. Not the victory itself, but the realization that you had to become strong alone. You had to grow in silence while others slept on your potential. You had to believe in yourself when nobody else did. And now they are watching you differently. Some admire you secretly, some resent you quietly, and some are simply shocked that you didn't break. But you're still standing, and that alone is your loudest statement. Speech balloon, ask yourself this. Why do people only respect strength after they see it fully formed? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear your story. And if you're someone who has ever been underestimated, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to Mirror of the Soul, because this channel is where silent warriors rise. It's a strange kind of justice, not loud, not dramatic, but deeply psychological. The people who once dismissed you are now forced to sit with the memory of their doubt. They see your growth, your discipline, your transformation, and it reflects something back to them they cannot escape. Not everyone will admit it, but your success unsettles people who stopped believing in you too early. Because your victory is a reminder that they misjudged you. And most people hate being wrong more than they love being right. Some of them will smile at you now. Some will pretend they always supported you. But deep inside, they are dealing with a quiet discomfort. Because your progress is proof that they didn't see your worth when it mattered. And that's where the real emotional shift happens. Not in you, but in them. They are now forced to question their own judgment, their own perception, their own confidence in labeling people too quickly. There is a type of loneliness that only winners in silence understand. It's not the loneliness of failure. It's the loneliness of achievement that nobody helped you build. You achieved something real, but there's no one who truly understands the weight it cost you. You start to realize something painful. Not everyone clapped for your struggle, and now not everyone is qualified to celebrate your success. You may be surrounded by people, yet still feel emotionally unseen. Even your joy feels different now. Because deep down, you remember the nights you cried alone, the days you doubted everything, and the moments you almost gave up, but didn't. And now that you've made it, there's no one who fully understands that version of you except you. But here's the truth most people never realize. Loneliness is often the price of becoming unrecognizable from your old self. You didn't just grow, you evolved beyond the version of life people were comfortable with. There comes a point in every silent rise when people suddenly wake up to a painful truth. You didn't need them. Not their approval, not their support, not even their belief. You built your path while they were still debating whether you were worth investing in emotionally. And that realization doesn't come loudly. It creeps in slowly through observation. They start noticing how you move differently now, how you don't chase validation anymore, how you don't explain yourself like you used to. That version of you, the one who needed reassurance, is gone. This is what unsettles them, because people are comfortable when they believe they have influence over your identity. But when you outgrow that influence, they are forced to confront something uncomfortable. You were never as dependent on them as they assumed. Your success was never just your transformation, it became their reflection. And not everyone likes what they see when they look at it, because your discipline exposes their excuses. Your consistency exposes their procrastination. Your patience exposes their impatience. You didn't even need to speak loudly. Your life started speaking for you. The way you handled pressure, the way you kept going when it got hard, the way you stayed consistent when motivation disappeared. And now, even your silence feels powerful, because it carries proof of something they struggled to do: stay committed when nobody was clapping. This is where admiration and discomfort mix. Some people are inspired by you, while others feel quietly disturbed, not because you did something wrong, but because you did what they couldn't. There is a special kind of emotional shock people experience when they realize you are no longer who you used to be. You don't react the same. You don't tolerate the same things. You don't even speak with the same emotional weight you once carried. And to them, it feels like loss, not because they owned you, but because they were used to a version of you that no longer exists. You stopped shrinking. You stopped apologizing for your existence. You stopped explaining your boundaries. And in doing so, you became unfamiliar even to those who thought they knew you best. This is the part they struggle with most. They didn't lose you suddenly. You evolved slowly, until one day they looked at you and realized they were no longer part of your inner world. There is a moment in life when betrayal stops feeling like something you need to confront and starts feeling like something you simply outgrow. You don't argue anymore. You don't chase explanations. You don't demand closure. You just move forward. And that silence is what makes it powerful, because people expect emotional reactions. They expect breakdowns, revenge, or endless questioning, but instead you chose distance, growth, focus, discipline. The strange part is that while you were rebuilding yourself, they assumed you were still stuck emotionally. They thought you were still thinking about what happened. But you were. You were building a version of yourself that no longer required their presence in your story. There is a strange shift that happens when people get used to your energy and then suddenly lose access to it. At first, they don't notice. Then they underestimate it, and finally they feel it. Your absence becomes a presence of its own. Conversations feel different without you. Situations don't carry the same stability you once brought. Even people who didn't appreciate you start recognizing what you added to their environment. But you're no longer there in the same way. You're not over-explaining. You're not over-giving. You're not overextending yourself for people who only understood your value when it became inconvenient to lose you. And this is where reality hits them quietly, not through confrontation, but through comparison. Life before you and life after you. Not everyone will celebrate your rise. Some will admire you from a distance, while others will quietly struggle with it. Not because you harmed them, but because your progress forces them to reflect on their own stagnation. Resentment is not always loud. Sometimes it hides behind jokes, silence, distance, or sudden indifference. People won't always tell you they feel uncomfortable with your growth, but their behavior will show it. They remember a version of you they could understand, predict, maybe even overlook. But the new you, that version is harder to define, harder to access, harder to control emotionally. And that shift creates discomfort, because your evolution removes you from the emotional positions they had assigned you in their mind. Speech balloon, ask yourself honestly, do people resent your growth or the version of themselves they see through your success? Drop your thoughts below. At some point, people stop checking on you, not because you don't need care, but because they assume you don't. You become the strong one, the one who always figures it out, the one who never breaks, the one who always has a solution. But what they don't see is the cost of that label. Strength becomes a cage when nobody asks if you're okay. You stop being comforted because you've become the comforter. You stop being understood because you've become the example. And slowly, you realize something painful. People admire your strength, but few understand your exhaustion. They respect your resilience, but rarely check the emotional weight behind it. So you learn to carry everything quietly, smiling on the outside while processing storms on the inside. And the more you succeed alone, the more people assume you don't need anyone at all. One of the most unexpected parts of winning alone is how quickly new supporters appear. People who were silent during your struggle suddenly find their voice when your success becomes visible. They start saying things like, "I always believed in you," or "I knew you'd make it." But deep inside, you remember the silence, the ignored messages, the lack of support when it actually mattered. And that's where clarity hits you. Real support shows up in the struggle, not just in the celebration. Because it takes nothing to applaud success, but everything to stand by someone in the dark. Now you move differently. You no longer confuse attention with loyalty. You no longer mistake presence for genuine care. You've learned to read energy, not just words. Winning alone doesn't just change your situation, it changes your identity. You stop reacting the same way. You stop tolerating the same energy. You stop giving emotional access to people who once had unlimited entry into your life. And suddenly, people feel like you've changed too much. But what they don't understand is this. You didn't become someone new, you just stopped being who they were comfortable with. Your boundaries became stronger. Your silence became intentional. Your focus became sharper. And your emotional availability became selective. This transformation creates distance, not because you want revenge, but because growth naturally separates you from what no longer aligns with your direction. There is a kind of revenge that doesn't need words, arguments, or confrontation. It doesn't need proof or explanation. It simply unfolds through time, through your consistency, your discipline, and your unstoppable growth. You didn't chase people down to prove your worth. You didn't beg for understanding. You didn't waste energy trying to change opinions that were never rooted in truth. Instead, you focused on becoming undeniable. And that is where life becomes interesting. Because the people who once underestimated you are now forced to witness your evolution without being part of it. They see the result, but not the process. They see the victory, but not the pain it took. This is not revenge in the traditional sense. It's something deeper. It's the universe reflecting back what patience and persistence can do when no one is watching. There comes a shift so quiet, you don't even notice it at first. You stop needing people to understand your decisions. You stop waiting for approval before taking action. You stop explaining your journey to those who were never listening in the first place. And that is freedom, but it feels strange at first. Because for years, maybe even your whole life, you were conditioned to seek validation before moving forward. Now, you move without permission. This is where inner strength is truly born, not in applause, not in recognition, but in the ability to trust your own path even when no one is clapping for you. And ironically, that is when people start paying attention again. When they realize you no longer depend on their opinions, your presence becomes more powerful than ever. One of the most subtle shifts after winning alone is the way people begin to observe you differently. They still see you. They still notice your progress. But something has changed. They don't know how to interact with you anymore. You're not the same person they used to advise, doubt, or overlook. You've stepped into a version of yourself that feels unfamiliar to them. And now there is hesitation where there used to be comfort. Some will admire you quietly. Some will compare themselves silently. Some will even avoid you altogether, not because you've changed in a negative way, but because your growth makes them reflect on their own inaction. And so they watch from a distance, without words, without confrontation, just observation. There is a moment in your journey where something deeper than success begins to unfold. It's not just external growth, it's an internal awakening. You stop asking, "Do they approve of me?" and start asking, "Is this aligned with who I am becoming?" And that shift changes everything, because approval is heavy. It ties your decisions to other people's emotions, expectations, and limitations. But alignment is freedom, it's clarity, it's truth without distortion. You begin to notice how much energy you once wasted trying to be understood, trying to be accepted, trying to be validated by people who were never truly invested in your evolution. And slowly, you release that need. This is where your spirit becomes lighter, but your presence becomes stronger. Because when you stop seeking permission, you start operating from purpose. At some point, you start choosing peace over emotional chaos, not because you stopped caring, but because you started caring about yourself more. You no longer argue to be understood. You no longer chase closure from people who gave you confusion. You no longer force emotional connections that constantly drain your energy. This is emotional detachment, not coldness, not arrogance, but clarity. You realize that not every relationship deserves access to your inner world. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every situation deserves your emotional energy. And ironically, the more detached you become, the more stable your life feels. Your mind becomes quieter. Your focus becomes sharper. Your goals become clearer. This is where your transformation becomes undeniable. You stop explaining your choices. You stop defending your silence. You stop justifying your direction. Not because you are hiding, but because you no longer feel the need to be understood by everyone. There is power in that silence, because explanations are often requests for acceptance, and once you outgrow the need for acceptance, you outgrow the need for explanations too. People may still have questions about you. They may still try to interpret your journey, but you are no longer available for emotional negotiation. You are moving with certainty now. And this is what truly unsettles others, not your success, but your independence from their perception of it. There comes a point where you don't just outgrow people, you outgrow the entire emotional frequency of your past life. Places feel different. Conversations feel shallow. Even familiar faces start to feel like memories instead of connections. It's not hatred. It's not arrogance. It's evolution. You simply cannot go back to thinking, reacting, or living the way you used to. The energy that once shaped your decisions no longer fits the person you've become. And this is where confusion begins for others. They try to reconnect with the old you, but that version doesn't exist anymore. You didn't disappear, you transformed. And transformation always creates distance from the familiar. Now, even your silence carries maturity. Even your absence carries clarity. Even your presence feels intentional instead of available. This is the final stage of silent victory. Not arrogance, not superiority, but emotional and mental independence so deep that no one can easily shake your direction anymore. You didn't win by destroying others. You won by building yourself beyond what others expected you to become. And now, the same people who doubted you are left with one realization. They can see you, but they can't influence you anymore. That is what truly eats them alive. Not your success, but your independence from their opinions, their validation, and their emotional control over your past self. You are no longer reacting to the world, you are observing it. You are no longer proving anything, you are simply existing in your growth. And that quiet power is something many people will never understand. Speech balloon final question. Is true victory when you are celebrated by others, or when you no longer need to be? Drop your answer below. And if this message resonates with your journey, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video. Join the community at Mirror of the Soul, where silent warriors rise, heal, and transform into something unstoppable.